Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Hi everyone, my name's Katie Crane. I am the Pilates professional. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge podcast. I'm driving solo with you today, and we are talking all about programming, lesson planning, and teaching. When I first came out of my teacher training, after I'd been teaching for a little while, and I was not fortunate enough to be able to teach underneath an established educator, there was no Pilates studio where I relocated after my teacher training. So I was on my own, and I made so many mistakes over the years because I didn't have somebody to guide me through those first few years of teaching, which is part of the reason this podcast is here. I really want to empower all teachers of Pilates, but in this episode, I am particularly interested in empowering new instructors of Pilates. Because when I first came out of my certification program, my program was amazing. You know, I spent 12 months with an amazing mentor, and I learned so much from spending every single day in her studio, observing her, shadow teaching with her, and learning from her. But when it came to putting all of what I had learned in my certification program into a real life situation, I actually wasn't quite prepared. And because of that, I ended up spending so much time writing lesson plans for my clients that I felt like I was being paid peanuts as a Pilates instructor. I know that I'm not alone. I know that a lot of people feel that they're not getting paid well enough as a Pilates instructor, but I wonder if they have fallen into the trap that I fell into, and that was writing a lesson program or a lesson plan for every class I was going to be teaching. So then instead of just walking into the studio and teaching for my 1 hour, my 2 hour, my 4 hours, we end up not only teaching for, say, that 1 hour, but we're programming a lesson for 2 hours before we even take that program to the floor. It does not have to be like this. When we teach Pilates, we could teach the exact same class many, many, many times over, and nobody in the class is going to realize that it is exactly the same class if we teach it well. So I'm going to break that down for you today, and I really hope that you take this on board, whether or not you've been teaching forever or whether you are new to teaching. I want to save you time so that you can just get out there and love sharing Pilates with people and not feel like teaching Pilates is taking over your entire life, because as Pilates instructors, we give so much of ourselves to our clients, and that is a very, very important thing for us to be doing. We are serving our community, but if we have to spend so much extra time planning to serve our community, then we end up burnt out way too soon. So this is how I want you to think of your teaching. I'm going to take one single class, and let's assume that it's a fundamental class. It can be any level class. It doesn't matter. It's a fundamental class. In that class, we've probably got footwork, feet in straps, some sort of extra leg work, spinal articulation, arm work, back extension, lateral flexion, rotation, some balance and stretching. Say that's all, right? Say that's your full class. So if you took that class, you've written that one program, and you go and teach that class once, how can you take that class back to those same people numerous times. And in fact, I would say that one class could probably be taught 10 times over to the same people, and they can actually keep learning and learn deeper every single time you teach the class. And they can even get a completely different experience out of the class. This is how I do it. Within a class, you could choose to focus on one of the Pilates principles: breath, concentration, flow, precision, any of the principles. You could choose to focus on one and weave that principle throughout the entire class, teaching the same repertoire. And then so there's 6 classes. You could focus on each of the principles over 6 classes, teaching the exact same class. But within that teaching, so within those 6 principal classes, I also weave in other things. So when it comes to teaching well, we want to be going deep. So as a Pilates instructor, we are doing so much more than just teaching repertoire. We are doing so much more than just putting a block of exercises together on or off of a machine. We are teaching very functional principles of body movement. And so you could choose any concept that you think is appropriate for that class setting and really focus on that concept. I'm going to use footwork as an example for this. In one session, and I also want us to consider that when we are teaching a class or an individual person, they are only ever going to take away 2 or 3 key lessons from that class. So even though as an instructor, we need to know so much about what it is that we're teaching. We need to know the anatomy of what it is that we're teaching. What are the muscles, the joints, the bones? What is good joint alignment, good joint placement? We need to know what the breathing is, whether it's an inhale or an exhale. We need to know spring settings. We need to know the setup on the machine, or how the body gets set up on the machine. And then we need to understand what successful or good execution of every single exercise should look like. But we can't teach all of that to our clients in one session. And in fact, so with my teacher training program, I teach just reformer and mat. It's a 6-month program. We've just started with a new cohort of students this week. We've got 8 new students that have started and 9 students who are just finishing up their exams. And every time we have new students start, and it always ends up that new students are coming on board when the last cohort is finishing up, it's always a very clear reminder of just how far people have to come in a 6-month period for them to be able to complete the course. But 6 months is actually not long enough for them to completely comprehend everything that it is that we're trying to get them to understand. So by the time students have finished 6 months of face-to-face mentoring with us for their reformer and mat teacher training, they only understand the very basics. They literally come out of that course being able to put a class together, full stop. There's really not much more depth than that in the comprehension of what students are doing after 6 months. And that's fine. And I think that it's really, really important, whether you're already a Pilates instructor or whether you're becoming a Pilates instructor, that becoming a really solid teacher is a long game. So 6 months out of the gate, you are just teaching exercises. You're just teaching repertoire. You don't even feel that work in your body properly. So it's very, very difficult for you to convey any of that deep understanding to other people. But you are ready to teach. So when you first start teaching, you are simply putting a class plan together and teaching the repertoire. But instead of feeling like you need to then put a new class together each time you are teaching, what I recommend you do is learn to go deeper on that exact same class plan. So in one session, like I said, you could teach the Pilates principles. So that's 6 sessions focusing on the Pilates principles. And then you start to teach good joint alignment from the feet to the head. And that might take a few more classes because our students or our clients can only grasp 1 to 3 concepts in every class. So we need to make sure that when a student comes into our class, we give them a task that they are going to succeed at. Within the succession of that experience, we do want them to have a good understanding and good comprehension of what it is that we are teaching, and we want them to feel inspired and challenged. But key number 1 is they must succeed. So the only way anybody is coming back to you is if they walk out of your class and they feel like they have nailed something. And they've nailed something that sticks with them. So say we call our foundational reformer classes Reformer Align. So we have 4 different levels. We have the intro to reformer, which all new clients come to, and we teach them how to change the spring settings or the safety on the reformer, and then we go through a really basic class, and then they move into what we call Reformer Align. In Reformer Align, we are teaching the basic principles of Pilates, so alignment, focus, their breath, good joint placement, and stability. Once they have nailed that, then they move into what we call flow. With flow, we're adding on full body integration exercises. We're adding on some endurance, so maybe more reps or maybe pulses. We're adding on more coordination. So say we go from doing our basic supine arm work, now we're doing cheerleader, and maybe cheerleader with some leg movements as well. So much more coordination, and we're upping the tempo a little bit. And then we move them to what we call reformer strength. Reformer strength is things like jump board or the intermediate to advanced exercises. We often are using a prop or adding small hand weights. For our clients to go from their intro to reformer class successfully to a strength class takes approximately 2 years of practicing Pilates 2 to 3 times a week. So as a student, when our students come out of their teacher training course in 6 months and they have to know all of the repertoire to get them to teach a strength class, they are not at the level of understanding a strength class yet. That's what I mean by Pilates is a long game. And don't worry about it. We all started like that. I remember distinctly after my teacher training was a 12-month period with my mentor in her studio, and I went out teaching. I thought that I knew enough, but I was spending so much time lesson planning that I felt like I was getting paid absolute peanuts for the work that I was doing. And when I reflected on my teaching 2, 3, and 5 years later, I distinctly remember thinking, wow, what was I teaching people? Thank goodness the clients that have stuck with me because I have come so far in that first 2, 3, and 5 years. So you will do that too. And if you've already gone past those points in your teaching career, you remember feeling like that as well. That's normal. The learning curve from becoming an instructor to teaching at 5 years is absolutely massive. And so as an instructor, we must keep repeating all of the Pilates foundational moves. And as we repeat them, then we understand them better. So within that exactly the same class plan, at some stage, I really focus on exactly what the feet are doing in every single exercise. So when they're doing their footwork, exactly where the feet are placed and why the feet are placed there, what the joints are in the feet, what their purpose is, how the feet are related to the core, how the feet are related to neck and shoulder, how the feet are related to posture, how the feet are the foundation of absolutely everything that we do. And I could easily do 4 to 6 classes just on going deep into the importance of foot placement and using the feet as the foundation and using the feet to connect to the core. So because that's such a complex topic, as Pilates instructors, we are movers. So we are very body-centric, which means that we have a good understanding of our body in movement, in space, how to move well. That's our forte. That's why we become Pilates instructors. But the people that we are serving are not necessarily as well connected to their body. So rather than think that you've got to give somebody something different every time they come in, I want you to consider going deeper on exactly what it is that you're teaching them. And so then instead of having to write down a new class plan every single time you teach, you can actually be learning more about the class plan that you have written every time you teach it. This is key to us all becoming really good instructors, is knowing, really understanding the depth of the work that it is that we're doing. So when I talk to you about the feet being part of the core structure, or, the feet being directly related to posture, or the feet being your foundation, if you don't understand that yet, that's totally fine. Rather than putting together another class plan, go and continue learning. And that is then going to ensure that you don't burn yourself out from just writing classes. You are continuing to stay inspired and on the ball, and you're continuing to grow as you're teaching that one single class. So as well as changing up the focus like that, you could do something as simple as it's exactly the same class, and if I choose a different concept in the body, so one concept that I always choose is the feet, because the feet are the foundation of everything. I also will often in a whole class talk about pelvic placement, because the pelvis is the cornerstone, is the center stone of our entire body. We know that Joseph Pilates talked about the pelvis being the powerhouse, and all of our movement, all of our control, all of our power coming from the powerhouse. If you have not listened to my episode with Michael O'Reilly, the neck physio, then he also talks about the powerhouse, or the core, the pelvis, being absolutely integral in working with people with upper quadrant problems. So anybody with neck and shoulder issues, they must be working on their core. Now, working on their core is not necessarily talking about the muscles of the core, but it is using the bones of the pelvis, so specifically the sacrum, and understanding where the ASI, the anterior superior iliac spine, is in place or is in body position to ensure that we have stability, our clients, our students have stability throughout all of their movement. Their stability comes from good pelvic placement. I was actually listening to a YouTube episode on the Biotensegrity Foundation YouTube channel yesterday, and there was a discussion with Stephen Levin. If you don't know Stephen Levin, he is very well known in the fascial field, and there was a big talk on teaching anatomy. Teaching anatomy is one of the foundations of what we learn, or learning anatomy is one of the foundations of becoming a Pilates instructor. But as you go through your career, the more you understand about anatomy, the more you realize that the foundational learnings that we receive, it is almost irrelevant to movement practice. I'm not going to go into that too deep today. I will do an episode on it, but what I do want to point out is what is relevant is understanding that all movement, good movement, comes from absolute stability. So the way that this conversation was yesterday in the Biotensegrity Foundation was that good movement comes from absolute stability. And when we have absolute stability, and stability generally comes from a body part being in contact with the earth, and quite often that will be the pelvis, or the feet. When we have absolute stability, from there, good movement emerges. So we don't learn good stability because we move. We move well because we have good stability. And I know that it has been really popular for, if you're on social media, it has been very popular for some Instagrammers and influencers, goodness me, what a horrible word that is, to be telling their listeners and their followers that joint placement doesn't matter and stability doesn't matter, that all you got to do is move. Now, all you got to do is move is only applicable if you don't move, you're going to die, right? So if you're at a point in your life when you're in such poor health that if you don't move, it's going to be, your end, then absolutely, all you got to do is move. But when we are teaching people to move in the Pilates field, we absolutely must teach stability first. And from that, the body then will allow the body to move well. So you could do so many episodes in a class with that being the focus, whether it's stability through the feet, stability through the pelvis, stability through the shoulders, through the hands, through the head. You could definitely focus on that. So there's 6 more classes. Exactly the same class, totally different focus. If you don't understand what that means, then you go away and you learn what that means so that as you're teaching exactly the same class, you are coming back with new information every time. So then in the eyes of your clients, of your students in class, you're an expert. And that's really what you want to be. You want to be the person that your clients look to because of the knowledge that you've got, not because every time they come to class, they're getting brand new repertoire. Nobody is going to progress if you're just throwing brand new classes at them every single time they come in. Repetition is absolutely key. When we look at the best sports people in the world, Djokovic, the best tennis player, I'm not sure who holds the crown at the moment, but Djokovic is hands down best tennis player in the world. What does he do every single day? He hits a tennis ball over a net every single day. Don Bradman, one of the greatest sports people of all time, what did he do every day? He hit his cricket ball against the water tank at home every single day. So any revered athletes, anybody who is at top of their game, they are being very, very repetitive in what it is that they're doing. So why on earth would you need to be coming every single time to class with a brand new class? You don't. What happens with these athletes is they repeat what they're doing so many times that movement becomes absolutely intuitive, that movement becomes a part of who they are. This is where the magic happens in a Pilates class. It doesn't happen from coming in and getting a buffet of classes every time that you go to class. It comes from repetition. So don't ever feel like you need to move on from something like the footwork, from something like basic feet and straps. They are all about functional movement, and they are always going to be key to everybody who comes into class if it's an appropriate exercise for them. Of course, something else that you could focus on, still using this exact same class plan, you could focus on the push and pull. When you're working on the reformer and you're doing your footwork, when you do your footwork at a heavier load, there's definitely a focus on pushing the carriage out. If you wanted to lighten the load and do it on a really light load, say like half a spring, the focus on footwork is going to be on pulling the carriage in. Both exercises or both ways of doing footwork are absolutely appropriate, but they're a very different experience. So you could focus on the push and pull of every single exercise. Even if you did your footwork, for example, on whatever spring setting you normally do it on, you could, and the focus does feel like it's on the push out, you could still bring awareness to pulling the carriage back in or resisting the carriage back in. You can do that on every single exercise. It's actually quite complex to teach. So sometimes I might focus in one class on the push and pull in all of the exercises for the lower limbs. And then on another class, I'll focus on the push and pull effect on all of the exercises for the upper body. So you could choose part of the class where you're focusing on it, because remember, success is key for your clients to come back to you, but they do want to be challenged at the same time. And you want them to comprehend what it is that you're teaching. So you need to comprehend it in your own body. These are things that you could be practicing in your own body to get. Spring settings is a really easy one to change up in the class. Just make sure if you're changing springs that it's not always about going heavier. No matter what it is that we're doing in Pilates, good joint placement is absolutely key. I'm always looking for correct joint placement. So if somebody wants to load up their feet in straps, their hands in straps, they are not imprinting their back into the bed now because it's too heavy. They are still maintaining good joint placement regardless of the load. But you can definitely play around with spring settings. And you would know that a lot of the time, doing an entire class on one spring setting can be very, very challenging for clients. So often when I teach what we call our strength class, so that's the highest level class that we do, people have come to us for 2 to 3 years for them to get into that class, and they're coming to Pilates consistently. I might do jump board as one of the exercises, but I'll do the entire class on a single spring. So by doing that, I can keep the tempo of the class quite intentionally high so people don't get to have a rest, but there's also no fluffing around with springs. So quite often, the lighter the spring, the harder an exercise can be, especially when we're focusing on the pull phase of the exercises. So spring settings are a great way to be teaching exactly the same class and changing it up. Of course, tempo can change up class immensely. You can go faster. You can also go slower. If you go slower, then maybe the focus is more on breath work. If you go faster, then maybe the focus is more on control, still working on that control and precision. With that exact same class, you could do a lot of, instead of say double arm or double leg, you do all single. So unilateral work. So through the footwork, you can do all of the footwork on one foot and then all of the footwork on the other foot. All of the feet and straps in one foot, all of the feet and straps on the other foot, same for the hands or for the arm work. You could pretty much be doing unilateral work with a lot of the exercises. Quite often if I'm doing that, because we're always working against the clock, then instead of, say I normally do 10 to 12 reps, now I'm doing 5 to 6 reps because I still only have the same amount of times. And of course, we haven't even gotten to adding a prop. So we've done so many different focuses using exactly the same class plan. Now we put a prop to it. So now we add a magic circle or a chi ball or a hand weights or a half foam roller. But I could easily teach exactly the same class. I know I said 10 times, but now that I say it all out loud to you, I could easily teach exactly the same class 15 to 20 times. I have not sat down and written a new program whatsoever. I am playing with new concepts. And as I'm playing with new concepts, like I've said, I am learning more and more. I'm going deeper into the work. I'm having a better understanding of why it is that I'm teaching what I'm teaching, not just teaching repertoire. If I had known this 18 years ago when I started teaching, I feel like I would have been able to offer my clients so much more in my first 5 years of teaching than what I did, because my head was so much in a book writing out programs, and then like I'd, get halfway through the program and be like, oh, is it that one or this one that I'm teaching? That I was watching the programs more than what I was watching the clients. The more we can keep our eyeballs on the people in front of us, the more we can learn to cue better, the more we can learn to teach to the individual, and the more we are learning from watching and observing every single body in front of us. So, my challenge for you this week is to write one single class, and teach that class as many times as you can possibly teach it without exhausting the experience for the clients in front of you. Now, assuming that you have the same clients come to the same classes time and time again, we do want to continue to have them learning. So we don't want the class to get boring, but I want to say that I can pretty much guarantee that your client in front of you is not the one getting bored with that same class. You are the one getting bored with the same class, and that's why you keep writing new programs. I've had clients with me for like a year and a half, 2 years, and I'll say, right, we're going to do footwork. And they'll look up and say, what height should the bar be on? Or what spring setting am I on? Or is that laying on my back? So just because what we do as instructors is so repetitive, for a client who's coming in to be taught, partly they come in to be taught because they just want to be told what to do. That's part of the enjoyment that they're getting out of coming to your class. So they're not necessarily really taking on board absolutely everything that we're teaching them, which means that they can come to class a year and a half later and still not quite remember all of the footwork positions or not quite remember what spring setting they should be on. That is indicating to us that we could continue teaching that work over and over and over again, and nobody's ever going to get bored with us. So when you are changing the class that you're doing, you're changing the repertoire, the very first question I would like you to ask yourself is, am I changing the repertoire to suit the people that I'm teaching? Am I changing the repertoire because that's the best thing for my students, or am I changing the repertoire for myself because I'm bored? I would say 90% of the time we change repertoire because we want to be teaching something different. But the whole point of us teaching isn't for us. The whole point of us teaching is for the bodies in front of us. And so important that we are always taking that into account. Now, my gift for you today, because I want you to use one class program and then do all of those things, I'm actually gifting you a class program, and I'm gifting you all of these different ideas of how it is that you can start to integrate all these different concepts using this one program so that you can teach the program multiple times. All you have to do is go to the show notes and click on the link so that you can download that class program and all of those ideas. And just so that you know, I actually have an online virtual workshop right now that is called Communicating and Cueing Effectively with Pilates. It's all about how we can better communicate to the people in front of us so that they can understand some of these potentially difficult concepts, because what we are trying to teach people is difficult. It is very, very succinct. It is very, very precise. If we understand the concepts better, then they will be understanding them better in their body. So please join me for this virtual workshop. It has 2 full videos and handouts. You're going to get so much from it. All you have to do to get access to that workshop is click on the link that's going to allow you to download the class program. You can use it, no problem. I'm gifting it to you so that you can get out in the world and just enjoy teaching and stop spending so many hours writing brand new lessons when your clients don't need that from you. My name's Katie Crane. Thanks so much for joining me. This is the Pilates Lounge podcast. I can't wait to see you next Wednesday for another episode. Take care for now, my friends.